I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. And then I recognize some faces from the Pathways Institute in Bastrop, too. So I think a lot of us were spread out all over the state this week. True or false? Ready? The completion agenda is about completion of a degree or certificate. True or false? Trues, raise your hand.
Can you repeat the question?
The completion agenda. Familiar with that? We're trying to get students to finish more degrees and certificates. The state has the 60 by 30, all of that. The most important piece of that work is that completion matters most. True or false? Okay. She's already breaking the rules. True or false? True, raise your hands. Completion matters most. All right, now she can give the answer false. What have we focused on as colleges, though, the most? Completion of a degree or certificate. Okay, another question, who is that about? Us or the students? In our hearts, it's about the students, but I'm going to argue that when we're only talking about the numbers of students who are completing degrees or certificates and how much our percentages went up, who is that about? That's us. And that's what we've got to change. Okay, so we're going to tell you our story about how we began to make that shift at my college. I'm in my second year as the president at Lone Star College Tomball. In my 6th year there, I came as vice president of instruction. I was at North Central Texas College for 12 years before that, so kind of in this neck of the woods. And in a peer group with several of you, Grayson and a couple of the others, Trinity Valley. So I've been engaged in the completion agenda work for many, many years. And the entire time I have been, it has always bugged me. And even before we called it the completion agenda, I always felt like our focus was just a little bit too narrow. So I've had the opportunity at Lone Star Tomball to try to change that and to begin to help other colleges do the same. So we're going to start with some stories. Here's Gerald. Gerald Holford. These are real Lone Star College Tomball students. If you've driven through Houston not too distant past, his picture, clean shaven, this is not that great a picture of him, is on billboards all over Houston. Advertising Lone Star College, start close, go far. I think Clarendon has that too. Anybody from Clarendon? He was an essay scholarship winner, new student orientation leader, peer mentor, Phi Theta Kappa college ambassador, was involved with TRIO, Terry Foundation transfer scholarship, and is now attending University of Houston. That's pretty cool. The rest of his story. He came to us. He is a recovering alcohol and drug addict, could not hold down a job. He lacked drive and determination and was not determined at all. So getting a degree or certificate was a goal, but that is not at all what it was about. What Gerald was afraid of was not being able to provide for his daughter. He decided to come to us with a worthy goal. As you've heard, that's the core, the essence of the definition of grit, is pursuit of that most worthy goal. And while I want my students to have a degree or certificate, I know that that's not the worthy goal. That is just a means to a more meaningful outcome for them. So his worthy goal, get sober, get an education, and provide for his daughters. And now he's working on a counseling degree so he can help others do the same. George Torres, Phi Theta Kappa Alpha Romeo president, the year that our chapter won Best Chapter internationally the first time. Jack Kent Cook Scholarship winner, Coca-Cola leader, a Promise Scholarship, Gold Scholar Award. Tell from his picture he's very decorated. He clinked when he walked. Great guy. George came to us after being repeatedly passed up for jobs. He blamed it on his ethnicity, said, you know, I'm working in a place that doesn't value Hispanics. He told me one time personally, said, Leanne, before I walked in the building, I sat in your parking lot and cried. I bet you all have heard students say similar things. When he came in, he tested into developmental math. You all know who work in education, what's the percentage of students who ever get out of developmental math? It's very, very low. He's a Jack Kent Cook Scholarship winner, and he started in developmental math. At first, he tried to do everything on his own, and he blamed others, and that didn't work. He got connected, he got involved, and he started to look at things more with a growth mindset and found his smart grit and his instinct and his tenacity. So his worthy goal was to put aside his pride, take responsibility, isn't that a great concept for our students these days? Pursue passion and achieve greater outcomes. One more, Heba Ramadan, 2015 Phi Theta Kappa Geist White Scholarship recipient, Phi Theta Kappa, summa cum laude, U of H Mechanical Engineering. She arrived here 7 years ago, couldn't speak English, started in developmental English as a second language classes. She had to work harder than everybody else because this truly was a second language. She was brand new to the United States. Her worthy goal, do whatever it took to persevere and achieve her full potential. So I bet you all can recognize from your own institution some very gritty students. Can you relate to Gerald and Heba and George? And they've got great resilience and instinct and tenacity and robustness, and they're smart and they have good grit, all of that. But unfortunately, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is policies and processes and pathways and procedures and practices and all of those things, and we're hoping that we'll just find that, as Paul said, that silver bullet and get different results and different outcomes. How many of you in your institutions have been involved in some way in the development of, let me pick one, pathways, because I just was there for 2 days. Is pathways a good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing. I am not anti-pathways policy process. So this isn't an either-or conversation. Right now, it's just one-sided. We've got to add the and grit to the equation. Who all has mandatory student success course? Okay, we require it for first time in college students, all of them. How many have mandatory orientation? How many of you, your students have to see an advisor before they drop out? Playing with that idea a little bit, that's a little bit harder to implement. Does that sound like conversations, though, you're having at your colleges? How do we make students finish what they start? Well, here's my argument. Before they can finish a degree or certificate, those of you who have heard my punchline before, don't answer. Before they can finish a degree or certificate, it's what we keep focused on. What do they have to know how to finish first? Class? A class. To finish a class, what do they have to know how to finish? An assignment. To finish an assignment, sometimes what do they have to figure out? How to get it done. So if we are so focused on the policy, the process, the procedure, the pathways, the practices, and we're not dealing with declining resilience and declining ability to critically think and all of that, my friends, the gap is never going to close. Can I get an amen? Because I feel like I'm preaching. Okay. So that's what we're trying to close, is that gap. We have a moral, legal obligation to create the best institutions we can be. Absolutely, emphatically believe that. Also, absolutely, emphatically believe we'll never be perfect institutions either. We just won't. But we can be the best we can be. We can reimagine ourselves. We can change the way students progress through classes so they end with 60 credits instead of 90, and that they transfer. All of those things we have to do. But here's my concern with that. How many of you are, if you are, stop it, but how many of you have dealt with helicopter parents? Tell me what that means. What's a helicopter parent?
Overly involved.
Overly involved.
I would say the parent that talks for the student.
Does for them, okay? Any administrator, who's vice president's president, administrator, dean, got a parent call before?
Oh, showing up in the office.
Yeah, what do they say when they show up in your office?
Well, my student's at another school, but I'm trying to get them in this class for summer to complete their degree so they can graduate.
And it's the mom or dad.
Mom most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, so here's your new word. Have you had a drone parent? They can hover remotely now, right? Track their phones. How fast did they drive? Did they go where they said they were going to go? I'm afraid that we're becoming helicopter colleges. When we do to them, we mandate. When we do for them, are we in effect creating a situation where we're perpetuating helicopter parenting into helicopter colleging? Is that a word? I just made it up. I'm a parent. I have a 12-year-old, I have a 10-year-old. I get that you want to guide and direct and protect and make sure that they're safe and don't have bad things happen. And I struggle with that as a mother. So I'm trying to still figure out what's that balance then between helping people learn that resilience, have instinct, build tenacity, without doing to and for them so much that they have no opportunity to learn those things. When I started this work, it truly was just trying to figure that out as a mother, and I couldn't help but think of our students every time I thought of this topic. And when we started this work, it wasn't to be nuts and stolts, or I had no idea we would go there. It was just truly to try to make a difference for our students. My college is the third oldest in a system of 6 colleges. Lone Star overall, depending on which math you use, and if you include non-credit, you know how that goes, 75,000 students. At Tomball, we have 9,000, which is relative. I'm the smallest one in the system, but I know from other colleges, 5,200 is about the average size of a college, community college in Texas. My enrollment was declining. I became president February 1st and froze the budget on February 15th. Our key performance indicators as compared to our sister colleges were lower than everybody else's, and all that meant is our graduation was lower, our persistence was lower, you name it, we were lower. So I also had a responsibility to my college and to our students to try to help turn that around as well. So while it is about the students, some of the consequence of that is it also makes us better institutions at the same time. It forces us to look at things differently. So now we're beginning to look at completion through a different lens. And I give you this circular model. So it's circular, you jump in anywhere, but I'm going to jump in at the experiences stage. Our experiences drive our beliefs. Think about this. Our beliefs drive our actions, and actions drive results. Okay, y'all with me? In order to get different results, then work backwards. What do you have to do? Different actions. To get different action, you have to have different, and to have new beliefs, you need what? New experiences. It's simple, okay? But it's the foundation for our work. So let's look at this guy. Let's do some examples. I don't know if the lighting, if you can see it. His experience, we're going to start there each time. He probably has never had a positive academic experience in his life. Struggled with school, may have been told he'd never succeed, may have even been told, yeah, don't do that college thing. Right? Maybe he doesn't even have an example to look at. First generation. What does he believe? Oh, come on, you guys. What does he believe? He's not worthy. College isn't for me. I don't belong here. So when you come to us with that belief, the first time there's not a parking space in the parking lot, the first time someone's not as nice as they should be in the process, it's the 4,000th student the advisor had seen that day, maybe he actually makes it through all of the process just to get to class, and the instructor says, half of you won't be here in a week. What does that perpetuate then, right? That belief that he doesn't belong. Is a pathway going to fix that? No. So now we need to create a different and a new experience for students who come to us with this kind of belief. Because then what happens? They quit. He quits because he believes he doesn't belong anyway. Okay, let's look at another one. This guy's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. Our students, some of them have very, very complicated lives. And I don't mean to make light of that whatsoever. While there is a declining student resilience issue, and I believe that that's research-based, I know that they deal with poverty, homelessness, abuse, neglect. Many of our students come out of the foster care system. I totally get that and don't take away from that at all. But maybe that has led to mental health issues, caregiving for siblings, whatever, and they're looking at us as, I don't know what else to do, right? Y'all, I'm getting lots of head nods. You've seen these people. So they believe they can't juggle everything, so school's the first to go. They may feel guilty for trying to better their own lives when others around them are suffering. It leads to all sorts of beliefs. And so they suppress their action is suppress their aspiration. Probably perfectly capable, but they suppress that aspiration. So we need new results. How do we get new results? One more. So here's this cute little girl. She's standing on a platform. She's the winner. I'm number one. Her experience is probably not so much unlike my own kids. School comes easy, especially Michael, my 12-year-old, and I'll talk more about them in a minute. A's and B's without trying. Got a call. I was telling Paul Smith, the art teacher called. Dad answered the phone. Michael didn't turn in an assignment. He's failing art. Oh, Michael. He said, Dad, I'm glad you got that call and not Mom. But school comes easy. A's and B's without trying. They're on the sports teams. May have been told how smart, how capable, how talented. You can be anything you want to be, all from a well-intended place. Maybe consequences have been withheld. Failure's not an option. Mom wants them to be successful, and she's going to make sure that happens. And Mom probably is doing that from a very good, well-intended place. But what does that then lead to? Challenges are bad because I've been told all my life how smart I am. I don't have to think or try, so now I'm having to try. So what's wrong with me? I can't let anybody know I'm struggling. So I'm going to quit. I'm going to hide. I'm going to give up. Or, like we were just saying, I've never had a struggle before. No one's ever told me before that I don't write well. I've never failed a math test in my life, so what's wrong with you? That teacher, they didn't say. No one told me. Anybody hear those things? Yeah, all the time. So then the action they take is that the action or result, they're so fragile that it just doesn't take a whole lot to say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to do this. So we know, and I'm so glad you got to hear Dr. Stoltz share his own life's work instead of me having to try to explain it. He wrote it. He's much better at describing it than I am. But we know that life requires grit, and it's hard, and there's adversity, and it's expensive, and it takes, sometimes you just have to dig deep, right? And that everyone in this room, me, our students, all have a story that we could tie back to the need for grit. When I share this work, usually some folks older than I am, and I'm getting to be of an age, as Paul Smith says, well, when I was in school, no one had to teach me how to be resilient. No one had to teach me how to be determined. I didn't. I just figured out college on my own, so why do we have to teach our students this now? Well, I don't know, but we do. So I want to focus more on the fact that we do than understand all the reasons why. And I think some of that cycle, those examples I just went through, help explain some of the why. But the real importance of all of that is who's at the center of each of those examples. It's our students. It's the people involved that make the difference. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about our journey. This really started, Chris, I had forgotten that we met at the C5 conference. I was like, what is she talking about? So I'm so glad you reminded me. We really started this work in spring 2014. 2014-15 was a kind of an exploration year. We met Pearson and Dr. Stoltz in the spring of 2015. We designed our Grit, Growth, Greatness initiative that summer. We did our research in the fall of 2015 and kind of continued through 16. And then now here we are, and we've re-envisioned G3 into what we're calling the Global Grit Initiative. And that sounds like we really set out and were visionary and had this great plan and knew exactly where we were going, but that's not true at all. Again, we just were trying to make a difference for our students. So I've begun to look at that journey through the lens of the grit construct and to try to help other colleges who are interested in this go, but how did you even get started? And it's just a way, a framework, a model to try to explain our story. So there's really 4 phases so far in our journey. First, introduce it, explore it, play with it, and then draw some connections. And in my way of thinking, this lines up pretty much to this whole idea of growth, resilience, instinct, and tenacity. Because when you're introducing something, you're growing. You're considering a new way of approaching a problem. You're using a different mindset to try to tackle an issue. So to me, the introduce stage relates to growth. Then the explore stage relates to resilience, because it's real easy in the beginning, because you're all excited, it's new, and then other priorities and other things happen. So really sticking with that, having resilience in the exploration phase. Playing with it, I think, ties with instinct. So I'll mention it here, it may come up a little bit too. The question is, was this, you come back to the college and said, we're doing this? Or did it come up more from here and grow organically? It was a little bit of both. And we had some time where we just were playing with it. It wasn't a mandate, it was just kind of an idea. And then as it started to grow more and more and get momentum, we just kept playing with it to grow our instinct. What's going to work, what's not? How do we need to focus on, what do we need to let go? And then with Connect, that's the tenacious part. All of that undergirded by robustness. So first, growth. As I said, we started in 2014 spring, and it started, some of you have heard this, with a New Year's resolution that I made to read 12 books in a year, right? 1 a month. It's not hard. I read 2. I read How Children Succeed and Mindset, and my world changed. And Paul Tuff's book, How Children Succeed, didn't really have anything to do with college. I was trying to just be the best mom I could be. He was the first to mention grit. And grit was one of 7 predictors of success for children. That led me to Carol Dweck's book on mindset, and hers is all the growth mindset piece. Both of them reference Angela Duckworth, and at that time she didn't have her grit book out. She had her TED Talk, so we watched Angela Duckworth's TED Talk. Had no idea who Paul Stoltz was. Sorry, it didn't pop up on a list of 12. Now I'm giving them away. I give your book away all the time. So as we started to try to understand these concepts, we had a TEDx Tomball event that spring where it was my very first attempt to try to articulate this idea of the completion agenda being incomplete. How many of us have said or have heard or been in a room, conference, whatever, where we hear students don't do optional? There's a clue up there, I think. College is optional. I get that. It's like brushing your teeth. It's really not optional because the consequences of not are bad. Michael Nutt. But they chose once. College is optional. So the idea that students don't do optional, I understand it, but I push against that a little bit. This was it's on YouTube, don't look at it, it was really bad. Okay, then we got to just the exploration stage. What is this? I came back to the college because it was January where I was really getting excited about this. Came back when everybody returned. Said, "Oh, I read this book. This is kind of amazing. What do you think about it?" And we just started talking about it. It was a very soft start. It was just a, let's explore this together kind of approach. And so our Center for Teaching and Excellence, which is our professional development office, led kind of a series where we did a common read with Carol Dweck's book. I did a Grit 101 session just to say, here's what I'm learning, here's what I'm reading, here's what I'm understanding about it. And then when Phi Theta Kappa came and said what their college project should be, I said, you know, this grit stuff has got me very, very intrigued. See if y'all can do something with grit. Now, this was before grit was everywhere, right? I like to say we were doing grit before grit was cool. And in higher ed anyway. And so this was all very fresh and very new. So it was just a great way to explore it and getting other groups exploring it as well. We had students exploring it, we had staff exploring it, we had faculty exploring it. It wasn't just me. All I did was lob the idea, say, let's look at this. Then the play, and it got really fun. So did that for a year through 15, I lose my track of time, 14, 15, 15, 16, whatever that was. And then our Phi Theta Kappa advisor heard Dr. Stoltz speak at the TCCTA conference. Were any of you guys there and heard him that year? So you had a brand new audience here. She stopped him and said, I have to tell you what we're doing at Tomball. And the story she relayed to me, you were like, I got to get on a plane. And she has 100% on tenacity. And so she just would not let the man go. So I'm sorry and thank you publicly.
Thank you.
That led to a conversation with Pearson and Paul. And I was just excited and shared our story of what we've been doing for a year, and there was a match. And so we decided to partner and to really start to play with this. Our model, these are just some pictures of how other people are playing with it. Through our research, through videos, Pearson's been an incredible partner. Followed our Model UN team to New York and created a video that showed how our faculty were infusing grit into their work with the Model UN students. And they've won all sorts of awards. Dr. Stoltz came out, did professional development that August. Our TRIO program is all in on grit. And just a core group of faculty are really, really involved. So we just started this G3 initiative. Because I had a year's worth of just introduction and kind of just figuring it out, In August, when the faculty came back and I said, guess what? We're doing this research study. How do you think they responded? Okay. It was amazing. I was so relieved, but they were like, okay, let's do this. So let me tell you about what we did in the research phase, fall 2015. So we designed, as Paul said, this experimental design with grit, actually I call it no new grit. Because when we took our faculty through 2 days of professional development, they didn't know until the end of that what group they were in. So at the end of all of that, we handed out envelopes and the big drum roll, what's it going to be? Who are you? What group are you going to get? And I remember standing there just holding my breath knowing, oh, this is going to be really good or this is going to be really bad. And we're about to find out. And you hear them open their envelopes and people start to cheer. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what group they got, because I had no idea. So they're cheering either they got no grit or they got grit. I didn't know. And the only negative feedback we had, well, there was two items. One is, as Paul said, how can you get me so excited about this and then tell me I can't do anything with it? I was like, score, this is going to work. But the other response was, because we called it no grit, was what if I'm already teaching resilience and determination in my classroom? It's unethical for you to tell me to stop that. And I said, I agree. Don't stop. Do exactly what you've been doing. Just don't introduce any of the new concepts of grit. So I changed it. We changed it on the spot to no new grit. So there you go. We were able then to do this experimentation. I have 100 full-time faculty, and then we included all of our student success faculty, which is primarily adjuncts, in the With Grit group. So just to give you a sense of scale on how many people were involved. We decided not to include all of our adjuncts at that time. I have about 250 adjuncts, and it just got even messier than it already was then. So we didn't open up anything with grit to them until the spring semester after the study was done. So as we've said, there's with grit, no new grit. Part of the magic of this and part of why it worked is even presenting it the welcome back week in August before classes started on Monday. Part of the reason why it worked was we said, don't do anything differently. Don't change your syllabus. Don't change any learning outcomes. We're not asking you to redesign any curriculum. All you have to do is encourage your students to take the grit gauge, show a 15-minute video of Dr. Stoltz on grit at your own pace. All 15 in the first day, 5 minutes a time for 3 days, however you want to present it. Gritify one assignment, at least one assignment, and then do whatever else you want to related to grit. We didn't add a learning outcome, check off, okay, I taught grit today, I'm done. That was not the approach. And then, as I said, no new grit. We had them also complete the grit gauge, have their students complete the grit gauge, and then don't do anything else differently. Now, what's not immediately evident here is all 9,000 students were given the grit gauge. Not all 9,000 took it. About 3,000 took it as a pre-assessment. Then, so we did that within the first week, 10 days of the semester. That's the pre-assessment. The experiment happened throughout the semester with how faculty taught or didn't teach grit. And then we did post-assessment with the grit gauge. And about 1,300 of that 3,000 took that. So we had a really, really strong sampling because we only needed like 345 for statistical purposes. But we had a 1,300 pre-assessment, experiment, post-assessment. So all of the data are very valid and very reliable. So the highlighted findings. The most important one, there are a lot of amazing highlights, but the most important one is what Dr. Stoltz already showed, was that grit can be grown. So there was an increase, average increase of 22 points in grit gauge scores. Now, the thing I'm glad he said, because I was going to say too, it was messy. I know that there were faculty in the with grit group who didn't do a dang thing with it. And we did not control for those who did gritify an assignment how they did it. We didn't, it was very loose, fluid. And frankly, this is being recorded, frankly, we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We said, go gritify an assignment, and we had some support from Pearson. We had some work session kind of stuff, but really, we didn't know what we were doing. We were just doing the best we could. If we knew then, when we did that research, what we're doing now with the way faculty are using grit rubrics, grit assignments, grit videos, the way it's organically developed from the faculty on their own, if we knew that, then I think all of these numbers would have been even more compelling. Agree?
Wholeheartedly.
Okay. Our overall persistence from fall 15 to spring 16 was 4.2% higher than the previous fall to spring. Overall completion was 4% higher. Grit, as you've already seen, was highly everything that mattered that we were measuring, GPA, completion, everything, it was all that positive correlation that you just saw. And then the with grit and without grit comparison, which is this chart down here. I don't know if we brought any of the printed case study stuff. It's online. For students who were in, or classes that were with grit, had over a 3% higher completion rate, success rate, than the classes that were no new grit. Now that gets a little complicated because we measure that by the faculty members. So students were exposed, if they had 5 classes, it's possible they had 5 classes with grit. Or it's possible that they had 5 classes with no introduction to grit whatsoever. Because it was, the assignment was by the faculty, and if a faculty member taught 5 classes, all 5 classes were with grit, and they were gritifying assignments in each one of those sections. Y'all follow me? So again, if we had known more what we were doing with grit or controlled more, I think we would have even seen a larger spread there. So now, tenacity and connection. So those results were so compelling for us because we can't stop now. We're just getting started. But we want to make this something that our school, our college, is able to help other schools also do, because it's all about the students. So we've launched what we call the Global Grit Initiative, and I'll explain that a little bit. This has become for us not just a nice thing that Tomball's doing. It's part of our Tomball 2020 strategic plan that's informed by our institutional effectiveness process. So we've got, every college calls it something different. We call it ACEs, Annual Cycle of Effectiveness. And every department has, we have grit ACEs embedded in our annual cycle of evaluation. It's in our strategic enrollment management plan, and then key performance indicators that I'm responsible for are connected to grit. So one of the changes in our funding model at Lone Star that has just happened this year is, rather than just being funded on our growth, just like the state, you get money if you grow, right? And what happens if you don't? You lose money. That's how our colleges within our system were funded. Now it's more along the lines of performance funding. So how our college performs here, who am I talking about? I'm talking about me. I'm talking about our college on things like persistence and retention and all. That drives our funding. So how we do on key performance indicators, it's very much part of that. And then we've had the opportunity, we just submitted our MOU to TEA for an early college high school with Tomball ISD. When we met with them, we said, we got to do grit. They said, we agree. So we're taking grit into the early college high school. Every student and family will get Dr. Stoltz's book and access to the grit gauge. Because hitting the students, we're also going to hit the parents on their grit, right? You're all excited about that. I see you over there. The thing I didn't mention that's also powerful for your institutions is I took the grit gauge. All of the faculty and staff took the grit gauge. So we have a common language with our students and with each other where I can say, dude, that's really bad grit right now. You need to stop. Or, you know, my score, I was above average, but my lowest one was instinct. And so I know that my tendency is, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. And I need, as a leader, better instinct on what we do and what we don't do. So it just gives us that kind of common approach. So to take that into our school district as well, I think is going to start seeing really collectively some impact that we wouldn't otherwise if we just kept it all to ourselves. And we also got a Title V grant. I still don't have the final stuff yet, but it's supposed to get final budget approval in October from DOE. And this Title V grant's a 5-year grant, $2.5 million. We infused grit and mindset throughout the whole philosophical structure of the grant. And that was before we even knew Dr. Stoltz. Now we have a mechanism to continue and perpetuate grit work for the next several years as well. So look for opportunities to find ways to support it through those kind of means. Okay, wrapping up, let me come back to this model. So introduce, explore, play, and connect. When I think of this, I think the message that I want to provide you as you mull over this with your own institution is, it's almost I don't know what the word is, it's almost counterintuitive. The more complicated you make it, the harder it's going to be to keep it going. You've got to keep it simple. And the way we kept it simple was that we did a soft launch. We kind of played with it. This thing just grew legs and became so organic because we let people do that. Had I just walked in and said, I read this book, Dr. Stoltz has it figured out, this is what we're doing, I don't think I would have gotten that response. And in fact, here's something for free. I've never said this publicly before. I learned it at the Pathway still. I cringe, and I wonder if anybody else cringes with me, when I hear people like me who are administrators say, you know what, we got to take this back and get some faculty buy-in. What does that imply? I've already made the decision, and I have to convince you to come along with me. Faculty, raise your hand again. That works, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. I've always said, I would rather faculty get my buy-in. Come to me and say, I've got this great idea, or why don't we do this? But let's do away with the word buy-in, because that's always going to imply someone's already made their mind up, right? How can we explore this together? Here's an idea. I don't know what it means. It's compelling. You've got to have leadership for it. It wouldn't have happened, and so I get, keep it simple, don't force it. But if I hadn't have come back and said, there's something here, let's look at this, would it have ever happened? So it's just kind of this disconnect, but keep it simple, but it's going to grow, and don't force it, but provide leadership for it. It's just I'm not even sure that I'm articulating that very well at all. But it has become who we are at our college. It's at our core, it's our culture. And part of the unexpected, unintended benefits of this, I've become a grittier president. My president's cabinet team, yes, I did get Quentin Wright, who was asking me, because he's awesome. Yes, I hired him. I take full responsibility for that. I lost my train of thought because I got so excited about Quentin. Grittier, thank you. I'm a grittier president. Our cabinet's a grittier cabinet. We'll address the problem and go, okay, wait a minute. We've got to look at this from a different mindset. Let's look at how can we be tenacious in this issue. I mean, it's just given us a language and a framework as a leadership team. It's given our faculty, I have faculty say, I'm grittier as a faculty member. Students are pointing out to faculty, you just showed us resilience in that example. So it's become a culture center thing for us in a very short time without forcing that. We didn't sit in a conference room and say, okay, what are our values, and we're going to be the grit school. That never happened. We never had that conversation. It's been so natural and so organic that that's become who we are. So we've infused it in our curriculum. As Paul Smith said, we didn't limit it to our student success course. It was across our workforce, academic, online, face-to-face, dual credit. It was all of it. And so if we said we're going to do this, we're going to do it. Let's just do this. It's internal, as I've already said. It's now more external as well. And then foundation is commitment to it, and then it's our identity. And I don't know if you can tell, but I feel kind of strongly about this stuff. So let me break it down just a little bit, and I'll wrap it up. So with the curriculum, our next steps, because we're still growing, we still don't know what we don't know. Any of you at your institutions have a means or mechanism where you take an existing government class and you just teach it through like an international lens, internationalize the curriculum or anything like that? Our next step is to develop a framework where our courses can be designated in our catalog as GRIT designated courses that will be taught by GRIT certified faculty. So and that's what we're still developing. What does that framework look like? What are the steps a faculty member goes through to be GRIT badged or GRIT certified? And, taking the GRIT gauge, reading the book, watching Paul's video, whatever those things are. At the Pathways conference just yesterday, Quentin and I were sitting by each other, and I leaned over and I said, you know what? Every program that we have needs a program learning outcome related to GRIT. That just happened yesterday. That's how organic and natural this is. He said, yeah, we're on it, we got it. To that point, I'll share with you, how does this really, really look? Our nursing faculty, we have LVN and RN, most of you probably do. They are all in on GRIT. And from team teaching to just infusing GRIT into that curriculum, my pass rate is 95%. It was one of the single largest increases in pass rates in our system that we've ever seen. I believe that had a lot to do with the infusion of GRIT into the program. They didn't change the program. They didn't really do anything except change a lens through which some things were being taught. GRIT resources for faculty are important and crucial. This is where your faculty can just shine and grow. With Pearson's help too, there's materials available, and that's what Paul Smith was talking about. LaToya, who he also referenced, is our faculty fellow this year, assigned to helping faculty with professional development related specifically to a lot of things but GRIT. So I put a website up there. I won't go to it now. It's learnwithlatoya.com. And she's got GRIT rubrics, GRIT assignments, GRIT handouts, GRIT, all sorts of stuff. And that's when I say if we had that, what we've got now, last fall, to give the faculty too and say, here you go, and even Pearson's materials have evolved over a year from what we provided back last fall, then I think the results would have been even more compelling. So learnwithlatoya.com. If that doesn't work, try learning with LaToya. It was really late when I worked on this, so I may have gotten that wrong. It's learned? Thank you, you already got it. All right, good. All right, so then internally, now student services. TRIO grant, student life, student clubs, Model United Nations, Phi Theta Kappa. Everybody's talking about doing something with grit. TRIO's doing grit workshops for students. Phi Theta Kappa, one of the magical things they did, they're not doing it quite so much right now, is student-to-student stories about their grit stories. So our Phi Theta Kappa officers went into each EDUC 1300 section, and Heba and George said, I started in developmental math. So to see these the Phi Theta Kappa officers say, man, I didn't know if I could do it, that was magic. So the more you can connect your student story, get your student stories, capture them, because they all have them. Find a way to share them. Be willing to share your story, because I think our students look at us and go, well, they've probably never had a challenge. They've got it so easy. They're so lucky. She makes so much, I bet she never had. No, we've got to tell our own stories to model grit for them as well. I've mentioned common language. I've mentioned that our own grit grows. And then we are using a tool called, if you're not using it, do this, Adobe Spark. Anybody familiar with that? Okay, use Adobe Spark. It's free. It takes 2 minutes to learn. And it is a video. They've got templates, icons, music. You can create very professional videos. Now, you're not going to be able to customize a lot, but our students are recording their grit stories using Adobe Spark, and we're loading those up into our grit website. Again, to show that our students, everybody's got a challenge. And if we could connect our student stories to each other, then I think that begins to create that new experience that helps drive new beliefs that can lead to new actions. External, I've already talked about the school district partners. I serve on the Tomball Chamber of Commerce board, and we had our retreat a couple weeks ago. So I'm sitting at a table with the owner of the best dive restaurant you will ever eat at. So if you come to Tomball, eat at Mel's. A banker and 2 bankers, actually, they're both different banks. We're sitting there doing some planning, what do we want our community to look like? How can we impact our community? I just wish I could hire somebody that would stick with something. And I love to let that conversation go for just a few minutes. I can't hire anybody who's willing to, if they have to put in overtime, they quit. I said, I got something for you. So now when I mention, let me tell you, have you heard about the grit work at Tomball? They're all on it. So next is our employer engagement in this. So because I want our students to, if we've got this connection with our employers, and those students come through Tomball ISD, Lone Star College Tomball, and leave with us, and there's their grit badge, and an employer in Tomball says, hire those Tomball kids, they've got grit. That's the vision. And we can do that. I want our students to have those kind of opportunities to be known as being those kind of gritty students that will take 7 of 1 to replace 7 or whatever. Why can't we do that in Texas? Why can't we make, instead of, here I'll get political, instead of making America great again, let's make America gritty again. Right? Sorry, I'm going to cry because that was really good, right? That was, yeah, that was really fun. All right, because I never know what I'm going to say when I start these things. It just happens. So grit stories, our grit summit. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted our inaugural grit summit. Paul and Paul were there. Paul Stoltz keynoted for us. We had breakout sessions for grit leadership, grit instruction, grit student success. But, and I think Paul and Paul will agree with me, the highlight of the day, when 5 of our students stood up and told their grit stories live. And to sit at the table with the man who wrote the book and watch him react to our students' stories was so moving, and I will always remember that. From husband being killed in a car wreck, I was diagnosed with Tourette's, I'm losing my hearing, migrant farm worker's son. They all have the stories. And if you can capture that and tap into that, however you do it, I can't emphasize that enough. It really, really, really keeps it focused on who is this about. Now watch this. Guess how much that cost us? $0. Work study students, staff, faculty. The video wasn't, I didn't even know they were doing it. And they said, we've got this idea, we'll show it to you. I'm like, okay. So that's the kind of organic stuff that can happen. Pretty cool. We two quick stories on that. So I know all of those students. Alex is the one that always gets me, the one that was called stupid, because he was also homeless. He's an amazing young man. I totally lost my train of thought because I was thinking of Alex. I asked all of these students, I had the opportunity to show this video to our board of trustees. And the students came. So Holly and Homero and Sharvie, they were sitting there. And that just makes that so real and so true and so authentic. That was an amazing moment. I showed this video last week, 2 weeks ago, I can't remember. The CASP conference, anybody go to that? You see that then? I showed the video then. Sharvie is the one, single mother, substance abuse, wants to go to Houston Baptist to pursue her degree next. A man from Houston Baptist walked up to me and said, "Here's my card, give it to her." How cool is that? I mean, to be able to make those natural, organic connections for our students, to me, that's what it's really, really all about. So I'm a few minutes early, but that feels like a good stopping place.